Hi, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You're tuned into LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective. So let's get right to it. I guess I'm pausing, man, because I'm thinking about this topic, the Derek Chauvin trial concerning the killing of George Floyd. I mean, in our country, we've had several trials of the century that have been highly charged with race. I think about the Scottsboro boy trial. You think about, the Rodney King trial. You think about the OJ trial. And then we look at this trial, Derek Chauvin, who we all witnessed the killing of George Floyd, with him on his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, without any regard for life. And it just makes you pause. It makes you choke up. It makes you just to have to think about that. And this first week of the trial, and what we're going to be doing on LaVeist and ClaVille, is looking really closely at this trial, which is likely to be clearly the trial of the century at this point, and looking at it each week and talking in detail and looking at some of the nuances. Yeah. And so in this week, I mean, it's been emotionally charged first week of the trial, with the witnesses that the prosecution has put forth, people who have actually were there and saw this man's life being sucked out. I mean, as you were looking at the trial, I mean, I think about it as I was looking at it and how I was feeling the emotion of the different witnesses. Eric, I know you had to be, especially as an attorney who loves the law and knows what the law should do and oftentimes what it doesn't do. You had to have been, emotionally shaken by it as well.
Absolutely, Will. As you stated, this trial, I think it is definitely the trial of the decade. This trial is really going to show us how far we've truly come as a nation that embraces our history and our current issues with systematic racism. Also, it's our reckoning with Black communities and policing. I've actually watched quite a bit of the trial. Some of it, Will, I really couldn't watch. I mean, it was just that much for me.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah.
And Will, I remember that, the moment that I decided I didn't want to practice criminal law, right? It brought back kind of thoughts of that, in being in a situation where you would have to be in a trial like this. So it's a very difficult moment. It's a very hard moment, because this case is not a slam dunk because of the policies that are in place for qualified immunity and the like. But I think that the prosecution does a great job of countering any arguments that the defense may try to put up. And they've done a great job of getting, for the first time, I have not seen any trial like this, where an officer's on trial, where your own captain, lieutenant, supervisor, training commander, all testify against you, meaning the officer. I've never seen that. Never seen that.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of the cases where we often hear about this blue wall of silence, where police officers, even though they know that wrong has been committed, they rally around each other and protect each other because of, again, this blue wall. And I guess having covered cops as a reporter, I know that they often will look at this situation as well. They may find themselves in that kind of situation at some point in their career. So there's this tribalism of rallying around each other. But like you said, you've got the lieutenant of Minneapolis, one of the lieutenants that was there. You got the police chief, all who clearly said, this was way over the top. This was unnecessary. When Mr. Floyd stopped resisting, even if you felt that he was resisting and being overzealous in his resistance, when he stopped resisting, that was reason enough to no longer have to keep your knee on his neck, even if putting your knee on his neck in the first place was okay. And what I was really struck by was, and I really empathized with, was the witnesses who saw this. And individual after individual who was there, the people who were filming, the citizens who were in the crowd, yelling at police, look, you sucking the life out of them, you killing them. This is not right. And how many of them, one by one, broke down on the stand, feeling a sense of guilt, like they wish they could have done more. They wish they could have done more by Mr. Floyd.
Will, you bring up a very important point. A lot of times we look at these things in a vacuum. And, with social media and everyone having the ability to record, at the drop of a dime, we create so many videos, so much content that it becomes it doesn't become real to us.
Right, kind of numb to it, yeah.
Absolutely. But those people were there and they actually watched a man be killed, be murdered. Okay? Think about that. Not too many people can say they actually watched someone die, someone beg for their lives, someone asking for help. And minute after minute, second after second, moment after moment, you're seeing a person's life leave this earth, never to come back again. That is traumatizing. We have, myself being a veteran, I know individuals who have gone to war. They've gone into situations where they had to go on patrols and things of that nature, and they saw, somebody die, and they're still dealing with that today.
Right.
With PTSD and nightmares and things of that nature. That's what seeing death does to you. So, we can't really, we can't take anything away, Will, from the testimony of the witnesses that were there, because that's their true account. What really tugged at my heart was when I think it was a 9-year-old that was
right. I was thinking the same thing.
And they and to see a 9-year-old, actually, tell their account of what they saw, and they were just like, he was hurting, and it was like it was really bad. The man was hurting really bad. I mean, that's that pure innocence, right? They really don't know how to finagle they don't know anything about spin. They don't know anything about affirmative defenses. They don't know anything about testifying on the stand in a way that's convincing to the jury. They don't know anything about preserving record for an appeal. All they know is what they saw, a pureness. And when that child said that, I can only imagine, because going through voir dire and learning, how to pick juries and who serves on it. I haven't seen the jury, but I heard the testimony and I saw the courtroom. I can only imagine that if there's any issue with whether former Officer Derek Chauvin is guilty or not, it's going to come back to that little girl, that little kid, and what they saw. Well, another thing that really stuck out to me was how everyone that saw it broke down and said their regret is they wish they would have done more.
Right, yeah. That was just so powerful that it's almost like this survivor's remorse thing, or so many of them, because they were African American, were seeing themselves there, and like you said, wishing that they can do more. And again, this is something that happened. It didn't just happen yesterday. It happened a while ago, and now they're having to relive and be back in that moment and be back in that place. And just like you, I thought about, if the adults are breaking down like this, then how might this impact, a child long term? Because as you talked about that innocence, a child is supposed to look at adults, especially police, people in authority, as being on the side of righteousness, on the side of, these are people that you can depend on.
Right.
When things are confusing and things don't make sense to you, as a child, you can turn to an adult and say, okay, I can depend on that adult to help make sense of this. So as a child, and you see a police officer behaving in that irrational, obviously wrong way, it breaks down in many ways your sense of trust about the world around you. And we know, for example, Santa Claus is not real.
Mhm.
But there's a certain need for a child, it being innocent, like you said, to have beliefs in fantasy and things that are maybe not possible and things are miraculous, because as a child, you can't process the real realities of life. You shouldn't have to process them, but to have a child have to confront the sucking of a man's life right
Yeah.
before your eyes is just, I think, and again, I cry inside. I'm watching this and I'm listening to the testimony, like you said, and I'm like, I can't imagine the long term impact that this is going to have. If it's having this impact on me, listening to this from a distance, from a safe distance of the privacy of my home, uh, I can only imagine the long term impact that this will have on a child, just stripping away all sense of innocence and trust, in the adults around you. It's incredible.
Will, we've talked a lot about the emotion of the trial itself and just reflecting upon it. Like you said, there's a lot of technical things, there are a lot of legal things, and we'll get into that as we, go through our series of this trial, which again is really the trial of the decade, if not the century, as it relates to this issue of systematic racism and how Black police deal with our Black communities. But what draws to me are two instances where you have the witness, which is an older, elderly African American male, and then the female that actually filmed it, who at the time was a minor, 17, and now is 18 years old. First of all, to that young lady, the courage of a teenager to stand there and keep filming.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can only imagine what was going through her mind, and what of course, adrenaline is rushing. Everyone is excited, and things of that nature. Not excited, happy, but just the emotions are running high.
Right, they can't believe what their eyes are showing.
Yeah,
right.
But then after you sit down and think about it, and then you go review it, and she had the courage to release it. Because keep in mind that it wasn't released voluntarily. The body cam and things of that nature with the police.
Right.
I mean, a lot of these issues, a lot of these things that took place behind the scenes up front really aren't in the public purview as we see it, because we got a lot of social media things that are happening.
Right.
But they had to respond because the video was out there from a bystander. So that's the reason why the video came out. But, the other thing is, I'm thinking about her, and she said that she saw George Floyd as her brother,
right,
her father, her uncle, and thought about them. And she said she lays up and cries every night, asking George Floyd to forgive her, asking God to forgive her. But she got to a point where she said she had to forgive herself because it wasn't her that needed to do something different. It was the officer.
Derek Chauvin, that's right.
Who had his knee on his neck. They had to do something different.
And speaking of knee on his neck, one of the things that came out in the trial is that all this time, since, the past summer, we've been hearing 8:46, 8 minutes.
9:29.
It was actually 9 minutes, 29 seconds. So you thinking about, we're talking about nearly 10 minutes. I mean, 8:46 is bad enough, but when you hear 8:46, it's like, okay, maybe we can make some sense of this. But when you talk about 9:20, you're talking about, okay, you had
That's a long time. That's a long time.
You had your knee on this man's neck for 10 minutes, and then
that's half of a half of an NCAA basketball game.
Oh my God. It's like, well, this is totally, he had no respect for the man's life at all. And then we see another thing that came out is that Derek Chauvin's body cam comes out and recordings of him talking about what just went down and not being honest about it and underplaying and overplay. George Floyd was out of hand and difficult and resisting and so forth. Straight up lies. And I can tell you again, as a reporter, we know who covered cops. We know,
Right.
yes, the majority of police officers, because you deal with the public information officer, who's primarily the person you deal with getting information on crimes. They, for the most part, they will tell you what's honestly going on. But oftentimes, what the public information officer is going by is what's in a police report.
Absolutely.
And what is in a police report is what the officer on the ground and the officers wrote in the report.
Well, they agreed.
So when you see this video, you get a sense of, okay, well, how many times have police officers lied about exactly what went down with their interaction with a citizen?
Mm-hmm.
If he can sit there and nonchalantly, and you can tell he's stammering and you can tell that he's not telling the truth and knows he's not telling the truth, you get to wondering how many times not only has he done it, but how many times have other officers done that?
Well, I can tell you that, in dealing with a lot of these cases and looking at the issues behind it, it happens more than you think. Because at the end of the day, you have to, like you said, that blue wall is solid. It barely cracks. And if you crack it, they're coming after you. Again, I talk about Adrian Schoolcraft. Adrian Schoolcraft was a second generation white officer in New York City who actually said that what the commander was telling them to do with the stop and frisk, and he recorded those meetings, and they came after him. They put him in an institution. They came to his apartment in SWAT gear.
Wow.
Only reason why his father, who was a retired police officer from that same precinct, was able to find him is because, of course, he was retired. They knew him and said, listen, your son's here. They wouldn't tell the father what his son was. They were going to bury him. So as longtime chief in LA, Parker, mentioned, the thin blue line, nobody crosses it and nobody comes over it, right? And if you do, both forces, you're going to be met with the full force and brunt of the institution. So that's one of the things that we have to, understand and then break down for the rest of what we know, but for the rest of America to understand. And one thing I think that this video has done, because immediately, white America as a whole were saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Because corporations started speaking and they started giving statements about this, and philanthropic giving started coming down, just out of nowhere, trying to address these issues. But finally, Will, they saw exactly what African Americans have been talking about. Now, to be honest with you, I think they should have saw it doing Rodney King. I think they should.
That's the exact case that I was thinking about, as I was seeing and watching this case and seeing the replay of the video, because the video was replayed several times. And I'm thinking, this should be obvious. This is it. This should be obvious. But then both of us are old enough to remember Rodney King. And we saw that video of him getting a royal beatdown on the highway, something that you and I are very familiar with if we didn't exactly experience. I experienced being face down on the highway with police officers, and I certainly have friends who experienced that beatdown. I didn't get savagely beat like Rodney King was, but I certainly was able to relate. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, but Rodney King. But Rodney King. And that's the thing that is so painful about this, is that with all of the riveting testimony, like you said, police officers, EMT officers breaking down and like, this was totally over the line. This was totally out of hand, and I could not do anything. You're getting this type of testimony, but still, in the back of my mind, I'm watching this. I was listening to it over the radio as I was driving, because I've been, like many of Americans like you, we've been gripped to this. I'm thinking still, but Rodney King. But Rodney King.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good time to kind of segue into the technical parts, the legal parts of this case, because remember that this is Minnesota. Not too many years before George Floyd, we have Philander Castile.
Right.
Well, the officer that killed Philander Castile actually is back on the force.
Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that, really.
Yeah, but the Somalian officer, black, that killed the white European, I think she was from Australia, is actually in jail, in prison.
Yeah, he's doing serious time, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so we see the difference now, and that this is something that we'll take a look at later on after the trial is over. But keep in mind that this is not a slam dunk case, right? Based upon the legal standards that are going to be applied to this case. It was a win for them to institute the other type of manslaughter charge that they waited until the appeal of another case before they implemented it and added to the actual charges that can be heard in the jury instructions, because this now gives the jurors more options in order to convict this particular defendant. Now, as we talked about earlier, the witnesses that came about, the very first, some of the first witnesses that were there was the eyewitness, those who videotaped it. Right. So the prosecution brought those individuals that videotaped or were there. You had a MMA former fighter who knows what a chokehold is.
Exactly.
He was like, he was choking him out.
Right.
Had a female who was there who was an off-duty firefighter, paramedic, who was saying, allow me to check his pulse, saying, just check his pulse, which we now know, according to the training officer, that's what they were supposed to do. Both check for pulse and call an ambulance.
No effort to help him, no effort to revive him at all.
Exactly. At all. And all four officers, keep in mind, all four did nothing to help him. Even when the paramedics came on the scene, who also testified, they said that they immediately checked the pulse on the neck. And the question was, what did they expect to feel? They said, if there's any type of life, or there should be some movement here, because that's where the oxygen goes to the brain. He said he felt none. Still, the officer Chauvin had his knee on his neck. He was saying there's no pulse, but still he had his knee on his neck. He wouldn't get up until finally, and if you go back and look at that video, it was almost a minute, or maybe over a minute before Chauvin got up and then threw him on the gurney, still handcuffed like a piece of meat, right? So you have the witnesses that were there. Then you have the EMTs who came on the scene. Then you brought in before that, I'll talk about the girlfriend next, but they brought in the officers, the commander, the lieutenant, the sergeant, the training commander, all saying he went over the top, all saying this was not part of our training. And even the captain said, this is not part of our training. He went too far, and this is not part of our ethics and values.
Yeah, so, I mean, they threw him under the bus, clearly. Yeah.
Oh, no, look, I don't think they threw him under the bus. I think they actually held him out and said, listen, this is wrong. And I think they actually did the right thing. I think the connotation of throwing under the bus means that you're trying to escape something, which I know they're trying to save face. Don't get me wrong. We both know this is a PR thing as well, Will. But at the same time, I think they did the right thing. The question is, will it be enough?
Well, that is the question. I mean, and so what do you think? Because what we also saw was a glimpse of what the defense is going to try to chip away at, and that is Mr. Floyd's character, the fact that he was using drugs, that he was hiding something at that time. These are all the typical defenses to. Yeah.
He had a gun. I thought he had a gun, right?
Right. He thought he had a gun. So in some way, he was responsible for and created a situation that warranted a police officer putting his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So when we saw that in the first week as well. So what do you think about how all this apparently overwhelming evidence, but we also see that the typical attack of hitting the persons at their character, making the victim responsible for their own victimization. That very much, again, yeah, but Rodney King. Yeah,
That's right.
but
That's
Rodney
right.
King. Do you
Keep
think?
in mind, one of the defenses in the Rodney King case is that he was on drugs, right?
Right,
And they were saying, oh, he had superhuman. People,
right,
they thought the drugs gave him superhuman strength. Keep in mind, the officer in the Michael Brown case said that when he grabbed him, he said he looked in his eyes and he saw a demon, right? So so it's how black men are viewed.
right. So it works. So you know that
Absolutely,
that line
it works because we've been demonized for years. It works. And will it work here? If you look at the makeup of the jury, you have enough non-blacks on that jury to give a inkling of doubt that it could be, and it's also based upon their experience. So if you go back and look at that video where Derek Chauvin is talking to the African American male, the older male, elderly gentleman who was on the stand crying,
right.
he said, "Man, you just kill that man. You just kill that man." And of course, he's lying, Derek Chauvin, about reason why he did it. And he said he was probably on something. Mm. That's what Derek Chauvin said. He was probably on something. I had to handle it because he was probably on something. So it's that characterization again. It's that Rodney King defense. It's that Michael Brown. This guy's big. This guy, black men are big. They're aggressive. They get on drugs. It's not going to mellow them out. It's going to cause them to have superhuman strength, right? If drugs cause people to have superhuman strength, trust me, it's not going to be a street drug. They're going to bottle it up and sell it for a lot.
I mean, but you're saying, part of what you're saying is that, well, in this case, they've got a jury of diverse enough people who may not go for that argument and that stereotype, that old trope.
All you need is one now.
But the fact, right? But and that's the fact of the matter is that Black people also live in this society as well, and there's a certain level of buying into the tropes and accepting the worst of us as well. I mean, I'm thinking right now about the Central Park case, and I was in New York at that time. When all of that was going on, about the young man being accused of raping predominantly Black men, a couple of Latino, a couple of brown brothers among them, were all accused of raping a white woman. Yep. And the fact of the matter is that it wasn't just a Black and white situation. There was a lot of Black people in the community who felt that possibility was very highly likely. And reason being that, as we know, most crime happens is intra-racial. It's not interracial. It's people committing crimes against the people who are closest to them in their community. So there was a lot of Black people who were able to see, a lot of Black women have been victimized and raped and by their own people, just like majority of white women, when they are victimized, it's by other white women. So just because you've got a diverse jury, oftentimes there is a willingness to actually follow the letter of the law about what is being presented in the facts. So not even that is a guarantee, because a lot of times, because in these communities in Chicago and New York, major cities where Black people are, Black people put Black people in prison all the time.
That's right.
All the time sitting on juries because of this honesty about what is really presented in the facts and in the law. I think we have a history in this country where it's more likely that a white jury might ignore the facts of the case and vote in favor of, their emotions and what they want to believe about racism and so forth. So if this defense can put forth a defense that delivers enough reasonable doubt in this diverse jury, you may find that honesty to say, you know what, that is on the definition of what reasonable doubt is, it
That's
is
what it is.
reasonable doubt.
Right. And Will, you bring up a very important point. I want to make sure I go back to it. You know, we create this genre of crime on black crime, but in
Mhm.
actuality, as you stated, people commit crimes is intra and not interracial crimes or intergroup crimes. So basically, you commit crimes against the people in which you live around and that you
Mhm.
know. So that's a very important point. How that type of genre of crime has how we categorize that crime has created this thing that black people are more violent against themselves, and that's just not the case. But going back to the defense and the reasonable doubt that they're going to they're going to poke at is the drug use, right? Because the reason why the girlfriend was brought on was to
Mhm.
humanize George Floyd and the struggle with drugs. And
Right.
I think it's a little different than the crack era that of the during Rodney King's case, because we live now in the opioid era, where a
Mhm.
lot of the addiction, if not the majority of opioid addiction, is in white America. And opioid addiction has now taken a hold on a lot of white communities.
You think that sympathy will be there for a black man?
Now again, I I don't know. Will, I don't know. To be very honest, I think the prosecution did a phenomenal job of raising it and humanizing it. I
Mhm.
think also that the defense also did a good job not going after the witnesses, because
Mhm.
most of the witnesses were sympathetic. And they
Right.
the official witnesses, meaning the police and paramedics, and also the ER doctor, those individuals were then challenged on the actual policy, not themselves as a person. And I think the defense did a great job of not challenging that 9-year-old that was there. I told my son, I said, listen, the biggest mistake that the defense lawyer will make is if he cross-examined his 9-year-old. When it came time for the cross-examine, the judge said, "Do you have a cross?" He said no. That was the smartest decision
Right.
of the case for Derek Chauvin that trial lawyer made. So far, Will, you know, at this point, you know, this is the Derek Chauvin case so far. We've seen the prosecution bring their witnesses. We've seen the eyewitnesses, the bystanders. We've seen
Right.
the empathy that was given the, the girlfriend of George Floyd. The police actually cross over the line and testify in favor of it being too much force, which again is something that I haven't seen in these trials. So right now, you know, the ball is really in the defense court to raise reasonable doubt. So,
But as you bring this on home, yeah, but Rodney
yeah, so
King.
and
Yeah, but
and there is a
Rodney King.
but Rodney King. So you know, I make sure that we understand that this is not a slam dunk case. That the bigger charge or the most severe charge may not make it. The less severe may make it through, but at the same time, we don't know. But remember the Rodney King case. So this has been our discussion of the George Floyd trial against Derek Chauvin, state versus former officer Derek Chauvin. We're going to be following this case until its conclusion and also afterwards. So every week you can tune in and follow us again on Facebook, like, share this particular episode here on LaVeist and ClaVille. Also follow us on our other social media, Instagram, also all the others. And we will cover these issues and we'll bring it to you, because to us, that's the way it is. We'll see you next time.